In the late 18th century, British physician Edward Jenner explored the smallpox virus and created a vaccine for the disease. Edward Jenner's discovery created a multitude of encounters and exchanges with doctors, scientists, and politicians across oceans, continents, and cultures. Because of this, Edward Jenner's discovery saved millions of lives. Despite the people who disapproved of this vaccine due to religion and fear, Jenner's vaccine eventually led to the eradication of smallpox. In the 18th century, smallpox was as intense as ever. The death toll resulted in millions. The primary method used for immunity from smallpox was variolation inoculation, which was basically inserting smallpox into a person. This had a 3% mortality rate. However, there had to be a more efficient way. In 1796, in Gloucestershire, England, a dairymaid named Sarah Nelms contracted the cowpox virus. As soon as she caught the disease, she immediately consulted Dr. Edward Jenner. Jenner had been studying the disease for the last several years. In his youth, he had heard from numerous dairymaids that if you contracted cowpox, you would be immune from smallpox. Jenner was trying to prove this hypothesis correct. However, many people felt this idea was silly and ignored his proposition. Jenner studied the disease for many years before encountering Sarah Nelms, and was able to gather evidence for his hypothesis. Along the way of his exploration, Jenner learned that immunity for smallpox could only be provided if the infected caught the disease at its worst. This was critical, as no exceptions could be made. On May 14, 1796, Edward Jenner vaccinated 8-year-old James Phipps with pus from Sarah Nelms' smallpox sores. Although Phipps fell ill, he recovered, and when Jenner inoculated Phipps with smallpox on July 1, 1796, Phipps did not respond to the virus. Jenner soon published his findings in a pamphlet titled An Inquiry into the Causes and Effects of Variolae Vaccinae. Jenner's findings were phenomenal. Soon, word spread, and it reached many other people. English doctors were conducting experiments based off Jenner's discoveries and were proven right. It wasn't long after that they were exchanging their knowledge with others. In 1800, Dr. Benjamin Waterhouse, a Quaker residing in Boston, Massachusetts, received information about the vaccine from his friends in England. Like his friends, he tested the vaccine firsthand. Benjamin Waterhouse's family became the first Americans vaccinated with cowpox. However, Waterhouse wasn't exactly some philanthropist. He charged the people he vaccinated with large sums of money. The idea was unpopular with his associates, but Waterhouse claimed it was so his patients could be properly vaccinated by professionals. Waterhouse brought up the idea to then Vice President Thomas Jefferson, who said, according to When the Plague Strikes by James Gilroy,
"Every friend of humanity must look with pleasure on this discovery vaccination, by which one more evil is withdrawn from the condition of man."
America was taking action to the spread of the smallpox vaccine. By 1855, Massachusetts passed an obligatory exchange of vaccination to school children. That law's encounter with others resulted positively, as other states followed by example. The last American smallpox case was diagnosed in 1947. That year, a man in New York City fell ill with smallpox. His case would be the last. Although doctors assumed he was sick from acute bronchitis, it was after his death when his condition was diagnosed as smallpox. When the news of his diagnosis spread, nearly 3.5 million people vaccinated in New York City. That type of exploration, encounter, and exchange played a major role in the eradication of a deadly disease. Not everyone embraced the idea of vaccination. In 1804, British satirist James Gilray drew a comic imitating the smallpox vaccine. The cartoon features Jenner with solemn face and what appears to be a knife, holding down a fearful woman in a chair and cutting a slit in her arm to vaccinate her. Around her, about a dozen people are frightened, as they have been vaccinated and are slowly evolving into cows, with cow ears, noses, and legs. A few others are trying to calm them down with some substance to ironically cure the vaccination, but are unable to, as everyone else is panicking. There were many reasons behind people's motives for escaping vaccinations. Some people felt that it was not the government's job to tell them to vaccinate. Others weren't brave enough, believing that thousands were killed annually by vaccination. George Bernard Shaw, Nobel Prize and Oscar-winning Irish playwright, once wrote,
"Vaccination is a filthy piece of witchcraft."
While not everybody agreed with the ideology behind vaccinations, they were mandatory without exceptions in many places. Many may have expected the United States or England to be one of the first places to eradicate smallpox, but surprisingly, Sweden in 1895 was the first country to announce the elimination of the disease. Soon after, the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico was free of smallpox in 1895. By 1930, the Philippines, massive USSR, and Great Britain didn't have to worry about the threat of smallpox. The World Health Organization, or WHO, issued a challenge to get rid of smallpox from the face of the earth in the mid-1960s. They hoped to eliminate smallpox 10 years after their mission. Although viewed as ridiculous by critics, the WHO announced in May 1980 that smallpox was dead. The last remnants of smallpox are held in 2 places around the world, at the CDC headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, and in Siberia, Russia. Edward Jenner's discovery created a multitude of encounters and exchanges with doctors, scientists, and politicians across oceans, continents, and cultures. Jenner's discovery in Europe led to the exchange of the vaccine to the rest of the world. This coming together of many cultures to solve a world problem is still a model of cooperation 200 years later. The spread of the smallpox vaccine shows what is possible. Neither cultural differences, political boundaries, nor myths kept the goal of eradicating smallpox from spreading.